Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 26th meeting of the Public Safety Commission. I'd like to do a roll call of our commissioners, starting with Norma.
Here.
Brian.
Here.
Matt.
Here.
Ed.
Here.
Richard.
Here.
And I'm Sharon Boucher. Welcome to our meeting. I'd like to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Matt, would you lead us in that?
Sure. If you're not standing, stand, hand on your heart, and begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Can anybody give me an approval for today's agenda? Can I have a motion?
Motion.
Thank you, Richard. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Ed.
Second.
Okay. I was not present at the approval at the April 26, 2021. I was with my mother-in-law who passed away within 24 hours of that time period. So I'm going to let you guys give a motion to approve the minutes as they stand and provide a second for me.
I'll motion to approve.
Thank
I'll
you.
second.
Thanks, Brian. All right. Brian, let's start with you. Announcements and introductions.
Okay.
Any announcements?
Well, first announcement is, can you adjust your camera? We can only see the duck there. Okay. Yes, I'll try to be as brief as I can, given a subject that I'm passionate about. For the last several years, there have been independent discussions going on within the city about how can the city educate and motivate citizens to take necessary precautions against wildfires. Similarly, there have been discussions, independent discussions about how the city can help citizens prepare for the big one, the earthquake. And how can the city keep everyone informed before, during, and after a natural disaster? Well, a number of those independent discussions merged early last month. And an organizing committee of 10 Calabasas citizens, including Commissioner Citron and I, from across the city, coalesced and defined a mission. At the June 23rd City Council meeting, the mission was presented to the City Council, and the City Council generously granted us seed money to get the ball rolling. On July 13th, EPIC, Emergency Preparedness in Calabasas, was legally formed as a 501c3 corporation. EPIC is built around three core objectives: educational outreach through trainers and professionals as a fire safe council, educational outreach through trainers and professionals on earthquake preparedness and recovery, and a multifaceted communication platform to keep Calabasas residents informed before, during, and after a natural disaster. Our mission is only beginning. We're a nascent organization. We're pulling it together, and I'll have more to report, a lot more to report at our next meeting 3 months from now. That's all I have.
Thank you, Brian. I don't want to be remiss. Sorry, I didn't do this in the beginning, but I want to welcome Kendra, our new city manager, and John Bingham to join us for a bit, or maybe for a while. But I want to welcome you both and thank you for being here for us. Norma, do you have any announcements you'd like to make?
Yes, I'd like to make one addition to what Brian said. We actually do have a Firewise community within our community. Westridge became a Firewise community in January, I think. So we want to be sure that we acknowledge that achievement for them as well. And how that folds into EPIC, we'll have to see how we umbrella everything. And other than that, I have nothing else to add.
Thank you, Norma. Brian, did you have another comment? I see a hand raised. Okay. Richard, any announcements?
No, Sharon, no announcement at this time, and so sorry to hear about the loss of your father-in-law.
Thank you. Ed,
No, I don't have any announcements. I'm very sorry to hear about your father-in-law.
thank you. Matt,
Just a reminder to those who have not been vaccinated, continue to get out there and get vaccinated while we have the opportunity to do so. That's it on my side.
and I'm going to parlay right into Debbie. Do you want to talk about the COVID?
Had a vaccination clinic with Public Health, Department of Public Health. There were 5 nurses here. We did it on Thursdays, on the 22nd. It ran from 10 to 11:30, and we had 29 people go through the clinic.
Excellent.
And they'll be coming back in a couple of weeks for their follow-up vaccines.
Do you have any idea, Debbie, what the vaccination rate is amongst people in Calabasas? Sorry, you're muted.
It's a lot higher than the surrounding areas.
John, do you have that? I don't know if I have the latest, Richard, but I know that at one of our more recent council meetings, Alicia mentioned that the vaccination rate for those 65 and older is 96 or 97% in Calabasas, which is wonderful. And the group 12 and up, I want to say that's hovering around the 75, 80% in town, in the community.
What was your other figure, Kidden?
75 to 80% for the ages 12 and up.
Outstanding.
Yeah, it's really well, yeah.
Very, very good.
The only one that I'm sure of is city employees, and we're at about 60 to 70% of full-time city employees. And that also includes consultants that work at city facilities. So pretty high percentage there also, but not everybody.
Is the city in any position, Kendon, at some point to require it? Either by employees or by people working with the city?
We've been looking at that. So if you've seen on the news, some cities have already started doing that, Pasadena, San Francisco, so forth. One of the advantages that they have is each of these cities have their own public health department. So they're not attached to the county.
Yeah.
So we're not sure all of the ins and outs of that, but it's something that has come up yet, but no determination from the council on that yet.
Thank you. The only thing, the two things that I want to talk about, which we will touch on when we get to the fire report, but because of the conditions and the drought and everything that's already going on with the fires, can't stress enough for people to pay attention and to do their cleanup and make sure that everything is ready to go if and when we shouldn't face a fire as we have in the past. The second thing I wanted to say was that in June, we were fortunate enough to 2-on-2 have communications with Kindon and talking about some of the issues for public safety. And we'll be following up on those later in the agenda. And we appreciate your time and the fact that you put it together, helped put us together and made us feel welcome as a commission. And with that, I want to go right into the sheriff's report.
Sharon.
Yes.
We made a little bit of a change. We're going to have Kindon go on next.
Okay.
And he's going to review item 6, which is the emergency preparedness report. There's a bunch of things in there, and he's going to cover the first one, which is the meetings that we had with each of the commissioners.
Perfect.
So
I would have segued right into you. I set you up.
you did. So I'll let you, Kindon, take it from here on each of their meetings they had.
And thank you to the commission and to the chair for having us or having me here today. It was a wonderful opportunity to meet with you 2-on-2. And as I mentioned in those meetings, Our goal was to hear from you. I really consider our commissions the opportunity to have that connection with our community that I may not always get. And so thank you for your commitment and your service in that regards. So we had the 3 different meetings, and I'm just going to go through quickly just some of the things that were discussed. We did the 3 different meetings to avoid any Brown Act issues. And so I think it's wise that we come back and then summarize some of the things that were discussed. As you can imagine, there was a lot of overlap and general consensus among the commission. And it just happened that we were having these meetings while the Palisades Fire was going on. So, foremost on the list was wildfire preparation. And let me just hit a couple of the bullet points under there that were discussed. So increased planning and training, improved communication with LA County Fire and LA County Sheriff's Office. And that's from the city to with those 2 agencies. Real-time communication to residents during fires or other emergencies. Evacuations and planning for that. Defensible space, brush clearance, and home hardening. And as a result of that, we do have Antoine who will be on giving a presentation later on. And so we heard you clearly on that. And then when Anton gave his presentation to the COG board last month, as soon as I heard his presentation, I thought we need to get this in front of the Public Safety Commission. And so this is a wonderful service that's available to residents of our community, and we want to get the word out on that. And then also under wildfire preparation is increased coordination with the city and the Topanga Canyon Emergency Preparedness Group. Also, there was a theme of decentralization of emergency preparedness. Sometimes we think the city, sometimes we wait for the city to take the lead on everything. And Brian, as you mentioned with the formation of EPIC, this is a great, I think, turning point. And we're allowing now the citizens to be those groups that will take the lead. And with that, fire safe councils, look for ways to engage the neighborhoods and the community. And then it was also discussed as part of the emergency provisions, these C trains that the city has in different parks and other locations. And the question came up was, are they adequately stocked? Who has access? How would supplies be distributed? And so those are some of the questions that we're looking at as well. Finally, there was several of the commissioners brought up speeding and reckless driving. We do have Tom Miracle here today that will do the presentation on the flock system, and also Jesse with a flock as well. And then also discussions on CPR and first aid training. I know Debbie just had a class, and we'll schedule those in the future as needed. And then one of the commissioners also brought up cybersecurity for city infrastructure, looking at that type of public safety or security for the city. And we did meet right after that with our director of IT, and we do have a very robust system in place. As you're aware, those who are trying to scam or fish for information, they're very sophisticated. Just this last week, we've seen more and more emails that say from the HR department or from such and such a person. So we encourage you, especially as commissioners, that as you watch your emails come in, just be cautious what may appear to come from the city. Again, our systems are set up to watch for that and protect from it, but it also is just, we're seeing it's going outward as well, not coming from the city, but just people know who commissioners are and other volunteers. So those are the big themes. And so we're working on those. We do have some action items that we'll be looking at over the next couple months. And Debbie will be able to report back on those at a future meeting. But I'm open to any questions if you have any at this time.
Any questions for Kendon? No questions? Kendon, thank you very much. And I'm sure there will be questions as we go along. And again, from the commission, we really appreciate the fact that you listened and you heard us, and that there are some action items already going on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. All right, now next we'll move right on to Deputy Di Matteo.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you all. I am Deputy Di Matteo from the Lost Hills Sheriff Station. I have the crime report for the months of April, May, and June. So let's get right into it. For April of 2021, there does show a rape allegation on this crime report. However, there has been an amendment. That allegation occurred in Agora Hills. The correction was made and it was forwarded to the city, so it should reflect this. So for this month, there are no rape allegations. We did have one armed robbery. This was an incident that took place at a hotel in the early morning hours where someone was pistol whipped and their property was taken. We had two strong arm robberies. One of them occurred in the parking lot of a grocery store where personal property was taken. And the other one happened, again, in a grocery store parking lot in the middle of the afternoon where personal property was taken. We had one assault. We had one residential burglary, two burglaries to a business, and three burglaries to locked vehicles. So right now, theft is up. And in including those thefts, grand thefts, we had 3, 5 petty thefts, and 6 thefts from unlocked vehicles. We did have 2 stolen vehicles. One was a sports car and one was an older truck. And we also had 1 domestic violence felony. Now into May, we had 1 strong arm robbery. This was more of a domestic violence incident where 2 people knew each other. We had 2 assaults, 2 residential burglaries, 3 burglaries to a business, and 5 from locked vehicles. We had 6 grand theft incidents, 5 petty theft incidents, and 6 thefts from unlocked vehicles. We did have 2 stolen vehicles and 1 arson. Now into June, there was 1 rape allegation, 1 sexual assault allegation. This incident occurred in 2019 and was reported in June of 2021. That investigation is being handled by the Sheriff's Special Victims Bureau. And so any further information regarding that investigation is unknown at this time. We had 2 residential burglaries, 4 burglaries to a business, 1 to a garage or an outbuilding, and 2 burglaries from locked vehicles. We had 3 grand thefts, 5 petty thefts, and 4 thefts from unlocked vehicles. So property is continuing to be stolen from unlocked vehicles for some reason. We had 4 grand theft incidents, 1 arson, and 1 domestic violence felony. Now for all 3 months, the crime rate is up. In May, it was up 11%. In April, it was up 25%. And then back in June, it went up 12%. That's it for the crime report. Are there any questions or comments, or did you guys want to go over anything else related?
Any questions?
I've got a quick one. Just curious about when you apprehend any of these people that do these crimes, are most of them out of the city that you find? Or,
no, sir, they're not.
So that's particularly the thefts, I can't speak. The thefts are within the city?
Thefts within the city are usually committed by individuals that live within proximity of Calabasas, but not in Calabasas. So we get a lot of criminals from the city of Los Angeles and from the Ventura County area.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. What was the arson?
Yes, the arson. This was a resident on the 4200 block of Las Virgenes Road, up in those apartments on North Las Virgenes. Somebody set fire to a mattress and it actually in turn did damage to parts of the building. So that person was arrested for arson.
Any other questions?
I'll throw one out there, Sharon.
Okay.
Obviously, property crime is a big focus here, not surprisingly. It seems like our local retail is a huge target at that. Is there anything just at a high level recommendation wise you could suggest putting out that might help some of them start countering some of the retail theft that's happening?
Yeah, so retail theft is huge right now. I'm sure you guys have seen on the news individuals walking out with big bags of clothing and no one's doing anything about it. So it is a big issue. And just to let you guys know, I'm out there every week coordinating with retailers. We're doing operations where we have undercovers watching, and it's interesting because we will be there for 4 to 6 hours and then we leave, and then 15 minutes later a theft occurs. So it's really difficult right now. Just recently, this month, one of the retail establishments in the Commons, it was a makeup store, got hit from a professional retail theft group from Oakland. And this crew from Oakland drove to several different stores in this area, but then they were actually apprehended a later time by CHP near Fresno. So it's happening a lot. A lot of people from out of town are coming here to commit these crimes. And I'm hoping that we can combat it somehow with either security or with a heavier presence of law enforcement. But right now it is a big issue. And the thing is a lot of these retailers have policies for their employees not to get involved. And when I say not to get involved, that means let the theft occur, then they have to call their loss prevention to report it, and then they have to get authorization from loss prevention to call the sheriffs. So by the time a theft occurs, or from the time a theft occurs to when we're notified, it's usually an hour after the crime occurs. So it's hard to catch these people. So what I recommend to retailers is get security. Private security helps. And I mean, I can't recommend tougher policy. That's their business. So, I mean, we're trying our best here, but it is becoming increasingly difficult to apprehend these people.
Good question.
Richard.
Mason, you had mentioned that it seemed like you were surveilling someplace for several hours, and shortly after you left, there was a crime. Are you guys visible? Are you undercover when you're doing that?
Sometimes we are, sometimes we aren't. We like to mix it up. We don't like to develop patterns, so criminals see us in the same spot and the same place and the same time. So yes, we are in uniform and visible sometimes, and that will just deter theft from occurring outright. And then when we are undercover in plain clothes, we're hoping to catch organized retail theft crews, but it hasn't happened so far.
There's one thing that comes to mind that you made me think of is about 10 years ago, I was speaking to the manager of Fry's that used to be on Canoga Avenue, Woodland Hills.
Right.
I said, how come when I come to the store, particularly like on a weekend, there's an LAPD car parked in front of the store? And he said, oh, they just leave it here. He said, It's amazing to turn. We just leave it there. There's nobody here. They just leave the car here and come pick it up the next day or something. He said, it's a great deterrent to crime. I don't know if you guys ever thought about that, but.
Yeah, I don't know if you've driven down Calabasas Road. I had a black and white sheriff's patrol vehicle right outside the makeup store there, Ulta. I had it there for about a week, and in that week's time, the car was vandalized. Somebody had put flowers on our car. It's kind of like a joke. So we do that. We do leave decoy cars in areas that are being hit with a higher crime rate. but it doesn't usually work all the time. We do it, and you know, employers or the businesses appreciate it, but we had an instance last month where a decoy car was actually parked in the parking lot in front of a business and a theft still occurred. So that is a tool we utilize. Does it work all the time? No, but yeah, it is something that we do.
I got a quickie. I've got an interesting thought. It'd be nice. I know it's hard for you to be in a business, and how long can you stay there? And it's obvious because of the uniform, but it might be a good idea every once in a while to go in pairs. So when the uniformed officer leaves, the undercover stays. So someone who might be thinking of the theft said, well, now's a great idea, great time, because they're not going to come back. And little to their surprise, someone's still there.
Yeah, that is a good idea. And just to let you know, we actually had that in place. The last time we were there for about 4 hours. We did have a uniformed officer there for about 2. And then I was there when he left, I stayed behind for another 2. And then an emergency came out in the city where I had to leave the area and assist with the emergency. And then the theft occurred. So it was really weird timing.
Crazy.
I have a couple things if there are no other questions.
I just had one follow-up from the last meeting, actually. Mason, I know you had talked about starting to deploy some resources into the street racing side of things. I didn't know if you wanted to follow up on that at all, because it kind of falls a little outside of the normal reporting.
Yeah, so the street racing over on Mulholland near Gelson's, it's been an issue for quite some time. I did go out there several weeks in a row to address the issue, and citations were given. And as of lately, the complaints to my office regarding street racing have slowed down. So it's something that we can continue to combat by being out there and giving tickets for various violations. And hopefully they get these, people with high-end cars get the message.
What times of day were you there, and what days?
We were there on Wednesdays and Thursdays between 9 and midnight. 9 p.m. and midnight. That was when most of the complaints were coming in, and we were getting reports of BMW car clubs going through that Mulholland area at that time. So I didn't necessarily see any BMW car clubs, but we did see some vehicles with loud exhausts that attracted or that brought a lot of attention to themselves. So several citations were issued, several traffic stops were conducted, and the complaints regarding that issue have slowed down.
Does the city have a noise level limit, or is that LA County?
I'm not sure. That would be something that I could ask code enforcement.
Okay, we'll follow up on that one. Couple of things. We are looking at having a crime prevention expo as we've done in the past. I don't know if you were there in the past before, but we certainly will be looking to you because a lot of the questions that we have, the greater community has as well. So we'll be looking to you for that. The second thing I had is when we were having a lot of graffiti around the lake, we did use the patrol car to deter some of the activity that was going on. And I believe the car was vandalized at that time as well.
Yeah, not only was the car vandalized at that time, but graffiti was written in areas right next to the patrol car. So the decoy car, it works for some things and it doesn't work for others.
Right. But the thing that I will say the loudest is for the community. If you see something, say something, but be safe. The Lost Hills will respond to you according to what's going on in their environment at that time. They have different levels that they have to work with, depending on what's going on in the city. But most of all, see something, say something, but be safe.
Ma'am, did you guys want to cover response times in the city?
Yeah, I would love to do that. Are you prepared for that one?
Yes. Just quickly, so the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department has a response time policy for the department. Responding to a routine call is 60 minutes, and a routine call, examples of that are standard report calls. So if your car was broken into last night and you called the next morning and wanted to report it, we have 60 minutes to get to your house. That's per policy. Other calls are non-injury traffic collisions that aren't blocking the road, certain types of alarm and certain types of alarm calls. The next is a priority call, and per policy, we have 20 minutes to get there. Examples of a priority call are business disturbances, traffic hazards, or incidents involving trespassing or certain type of panic alarms. And then lastly, we have emergent calls. Department policy is 7 minutes. And those types of calls are burglary in progress or a burglary that just occurred, people who are fighting, traffic collisions with injuries, or people who are suicidal. Those are just some examples of an emergent call. Now for Calabasas, we were within policy on every single call for the months of April, May, and June. Now, mind you, routine calls are 60 minutes. So in April, it was an average response time of 28 minutes. A priority call is 20 minutes, and the average response time was 9 minutes. For an emergent call, again, it's 7 minutes, and the average response time in Calabasas was 4. In May, our average response time for a routine call was 32 minutes. A priority was 10 minutes, and an emergent call was 5 minutes. For June, the average response time for a routine call was 28 minutes. For a priority was 10 minutes, and for an emergent call was 6. Any questions about that?
Thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that.
No problem.
If there are no other questions, we thank you very much for your time. I have a feeling I will be seeing you sooner rather than later, based on a meeting coming up. But thank you again very much.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Officer Leslie Haver from the CHP. There you are. How are you?
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me today. And for those that don't know me, I'm the Public Information Officer for California Highway Patrol West Valley Area Office. And I'll be going over the traffic collision reports for the months of April, May, and June on the 101 freeway. So for the month of April, on the northbound 101, we responded to 5 traffic collisions. Of the 5 collisions, 1 was an injury collision and 4 were property damage only collisions. The cause of these collisions were mostly unsafe speed and unsafe turning movement. And the year prior, for the month of April, there were 2 traffic collisions. So we're up a few for this year, 2021. Now on the southbound 101, for the month of April, we responded to 8 traffic collisions. Of the 8, 3 were injury collisions and 5 were property damage only collisions. Some of the causes of these collisions were unsafe speed again. We did arrest the driver for driving under the influence, and also unsafe lane change. For the year prior in 2020, there were 7 traffic collisions. Now for the month of May, on the northbound 101, we responded to 2 traffic collisions. They were both property damage only collisions. The cause of those collisions were unsafe turning movement and unsafe load, something falling out of the back of the truck most likely. There were 5 traffic collisions for the same reporting period in 2020. So we're down a few in May for the northbound. And then for the southbound 101, there were 8 traffic collisions. 4 were injury collisions and 4 were property damage collisions. Same causes as before, nothing was different. And then there were 3 traffic collisions for the same reporting period in 2020. So we're up, we went from 3 to 8 this year, so up a few. Now for the last month, June, on the northbound 101, we responded to 5 traffic collisions. Of the 5 collisions, 2 were injury and 3 were property damage only collisions. Cause of these collisions were unsafe turning movement. Another driver was arrested for DUI and unsafe speed. The year prior, there was 2 traffic collisions for the northbound 101. So we're up a few this year again. Now for the southbound 101, there were 7 traffic collisions for the month of June. 4 were injury and 3 were property damage only collisions. Collision factors were unsafe turning movement, another arrest for DUI, and then unsafe speed. And then the year prior was 7 traffic collisions also. So that was the same year after year. And that's it for the traffic collision reports for the 3 months. It was brought up also what the CHP has been working on with the street racing. We do have a street racing enforcement unit, which a lot of times, maybe some of the issues that happened in the city of Calabasas, a lot of those car clubs go out to the canyons where we quickly get calls, not from just residents of Calabasas, but also the unincorporated areas of whether it be Topanga, further down on Mulholland towards Montanito or Stunt Road. So ultimately, maybe if the SO doesn't get on the sheriff's department, it might be hard heading our way. And for those 3 months, we had 9 street racing enforcement operations. Can vary anywhere from 2 officers to 8, maybe more, depending on the resources available. Of those 9 operations, generally it's anywhere from 4 to 8 hours in all types of day, whether it might be on the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, or it might be, you know, bike night on Wednesday nights. Those operations, we had a total of 266 citations written, 15 people arrested for whether it be DUI or basically street racing and getting caught with reckless driving. And then 20 vehicles were impounded. Now keep in mind that, you know, might seem like a lot, but the CHP, we're pulled in many directions. Just this past Saturday, our street racing task force was up in Antelope Valley dealing with street racing complaints. We'll help out in other areas. As far away as Antelope Valley, we help out the LAPD in the San Fernando Valley. And then we do a lot of street racing in South LA. But honestly, if you talk to your friends and ask about their next door feed, there's street racing everywhere. So it's just not a problem with Calabasas, unfortunately. I don't know if people have times on their hands. They like to race their cars, and without tougher laws, they'll probably continue to do it, but we'll do the best we can with the resources we have. So that's it for street racing. And then the last thing before I take questions is just a friendly reminder with the distracted driving. I mentioned it, I believe, the last meeting, but as of July 1st, if you're caught either talking on your cell phone or texting, there used to be associated fine with that. It wasn't a point or whatnot on your record. But getting July 1st of this year, if you get a cell phone or a texting violation, and then within 3 years, you get a second one, it becomes a point on your record. So similar to getting caught speeding or something of that nature. So make sure to tell friends and family members that to phone or cell phone tickets in 3 years, you're going to get a point on your record, which increases your insurance rate and so forth.
Thank you.
And, yeah, absolutely. And do you guys have any questions in regards to the street racing or traffic collision reports?
Yeah.
Richard.
Good to see you, Wes. You and I, you were doing some demo over at on Balboa at the school there a couple of years ago. I forget, one of the LA magnet schools was doing an open house. I was taking some pictures at. When you issue citations for speeding, under sort of more or less what code section is that covered by? Is it just speeding tickets, or is it reckless driving, or what?
Generally, it's speeding tickets. It's especially on canyon roads where there's a lot of turns. It's really hard to prove reckless driving. You basically need a series of violations to have it constitute reckless driving. You need to obviously speeding, maybe unsafe turning movement, such as like doing donuts and drifting, something of that nature.
That was my next question. Yeah, I live over near Gelson's over here, and I could see the tire tracks there, and I hear it from my house at the intersection of Mulholland and Mulholland. There's people are doing donuts there all hours of the night, usually late.
Right. No, absolutely.
What's the actual violation?
For the reckless driving would be
people are spinning their cars at the intersections.
Yeah, that would be considered reckless driving. Absolutely. Okay. If you're doing a donut, if you're participating in a street racing or something of that nature, that's where we can actually be in the presence, seeing the smoking tires, skidding tires, drifting around with a bunch of people watching, filming with their phones. That would be, pull them over and get them out of the car and arrest them, him or her.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Officer Haber. We will hopefully have a good summer, free of fires, and you enjoy yourself.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Chef Chief Smith and Megan. Good evening.
Yes, good evening. Well, I just wanted to start with your fire family is doing great, and I'll start with the average April, May, and June for the reports, and we had a total of 5 fires. However, we did average 118 medical calls, 56 service calls. We had a total of 4 hazardous condition calls. We had an average of 41 good intent calls, and with the medical calls, we had an average of 34 that required advanced life support. And we had 44.6, if you will, for a 6-month total, or excuse me, a 3-month total of snake calls. So quite a few critters out there in the snake department for us that we've been dealing with our snake calls. So nothing out of the ordinary as far as our fires or anything else that we went on. One was already mentioned. The other one was outdoor type of fire. We had vehicle fires, and then also a 1/4 acre brush fire that was in the steeple chase area, and that was less than a 1/4 acre. And we had a outdoor fire on a balcony. So just talking about fire business, I know it's been a hot topic, no pun intended, and it should be for our risk for this year. So we know that we are in drought. We've only had 5 inches of measurable rain out of our average of 14 inches. So we're in approximately, depending on how you look at it, 10-inch deficit. And the fuels are stressed. We had the recent Palisades Fire that went for 1,300 acres. It had some complexities to it. We were an assisting agency and then went into unified command with Los Angeles City. We did have some evacuations associated with that in Topanga Canyon. We fielded numerous phone calls throughout the organization locally for evacuations. And the unified approach that we have with our law enforcement partners, that being Lost Hills CHP, went very well. They're always co-located at the incident command post with us to give a unified message on how we are going to implement evacuation order, a warning, or a shelter in place type of scenario. And every fire has different set of complexity and challenges to meet what type of evacuations are going to be needed. So not every fire is the same. So we all have to be very flexible how evacuations roll out. And the message on evacuations needs to be coordinated, as you've talked about. And how does that play into any of our cities or any of our partners? We have to have a sole source of valid information that comes from the incident command post, from the IC, and how any evacuation needs are going to be met. One thing that we find is there's a lot of people that listen to fire radios. They give out rogue information. It gets people spun up, and we can give false information. So we have to look at how we can best manage that information pipeline, and that needs to come from the incident commanders on giving direction, so we're unified with our law enforcement partners for evacuations. We are doing our re-inspections for our brush clearance requirements, and those are going very well. I'd like to thank the city of Calabasas for the citizens there and the people that are coming up to the firefighters and interacting with them, shaking their hands, and talking to them about best practice around the home. We appreciate that interaction. It's very important to us. One thing we also do every day, we have a daily risk assessment. We look at what our relative risk is for the initiation of a fire to start. Then we also have a second component to that, and what is the probability of that fire to spread? So we have a very complex but simple, if you will, risk program that we look at climatology and fuels data to look at how large a fire will get over the course of time. And that helps us be able to mobilize resources, whether it be air resources or ground resources, so we can move our helicopter fleet or more that come out of Barton Heliport, which is at Whiteman Airport. We can move them to Camp 8. We can move them to 69 Bravo for a quicker response time and action. And also our ground crews, that being our hand crews, our bulldozers, and our fire engines, to mobilize when we know we have a high risk day, that we can be very swift and prompt with that initial attack firefighting response. As mentioned before, as I did, we have a new aircraft assigned to our organization, which is a 3,000-gallon helicopter that is Helitanker 55. It came on contract June 1st. It's been very well supported in our organization. It is a multi-mission aircraft, meaning that it can fly at day or night. We also have the mobility capabilities of putting in place a mobile retardant plant that can be set up within 4 hours. And that can be utilized with that aircraft and also your LA County aircraft. So that is a significant enhancement to our aerial firefighting combat. And also our super scoopers are going to come on contract September 1st. And with that, your Los Angeles County Fire Department has the largest and most robust initial attack response anywhere in the world for combating wildland fires. And we look at it every day on what that risk is and how we're going to combat that, because it promotes us to be prepare ahead of the fire. So when we can look at the life safety component of our mission of combating that fire. And I talk to Lost Hills Sheriff Station, Chuck Becerra, all the time. I talk to our CHP partners all the time. So we are planning and always coming up with best practice on lessons learned and being proactive on how we're going to do the public safety mission for any type of wildfire all risk emergencies. And with that, I'll see if Megan has anything, and then we'll field any questions that you may have.
Oh, good evening, everyone. I don't have too much. I just wanted to mention a public education event we have coming up. So we are currently working on a virtual evacuation drill, and it's going to be focused on the areas, the unincorporated areas of Topanga Canyon down through Sunset Mesa. So it's not specifically focused on Calabasas, but I thought it might be of interest to you guys if you want to attend. It's open to anyone. It's going to be August 12th at 6 p.m. And I can send the registration link over to staff so that they can distribute that to you guys. And it's basically going to be us, Sheriff, CHP, OEM, Animal Care and Control, the 3rd District Office, and TSEP working together on that. And the format of the drill is going to be it's going to progress as if it was a real incident, but just compressed for time. And when people log into the Zoom, it's going to be maybe like an hour after the fire starts. We're going to have an incident update and then move through the fire. And each agency is going to describe like what they would be doing in the situation and what they expect of residents in the situation. So I think there's going to be a lot of good information during that. But other than that, that's all I have. And like I said, I'll send the information over unless anyone has any questions for either one of us.
Thank you. Any questions?
I just real quick one. I was just curious. I know in the past, it's been a little while, but there were issues with drone traffic that was interfering with your aircraft. Has that been an issue recently? Has that been reported much to interfere?
Yes, it is always an issue. We have people that put up those drones to get their footage, and we have to shut down our aircraft. We have so much aircraft that's in there. So once one is detected, and we actually have capabilities to detect that with our aircraft, and we actually have to cycle them out of the operational area until that drone is removed. That is of significance to us because it is very, very common.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Chief Smith, is your daily risk assessment available on your website or online, or is this just something internal?
No, it is available on our daily fire danger program that is on our county website, and Megan can send you that link, but it is, we can give you some information sources to help navigate that for you. And it's kind of like using a Peachy folder. It's you can move from the left to the right, and it gives you that matrix, and you know exactly where you sit on that relative risk, and we can send some interpretive information to you. And if you would like that, we'd be glad to do that.
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Okay.
Richard.
Yeah. Chief Smith, I am wondering, when you guys coordinate or give, I don't know if you coordinate with the media or give them information, it would seem to me to be really helpful if people could simply see maps and fire lines and arrows as to which direction those fires are moving. Because I've often seen people thinking or being told they need to evacuate when they're upwind of a fire, and the fire's gone. And you can stand there and watch it from the upwind side from 10 feet away, which a lot of us did when we had that fire over here in 2016, over near, intersection of Old Topanga and Mulholland near the high school. And I always, the media has this fascination with showing pictures of burning buildings, and they show the same thing over and over. They never show useful information, which is where's the fire, where's the line, and which way is it moving. And it'd be great if you could, I don't know if you show that on your websites or not, but I wish you would feed the media with that next time there's a fire.
Right. So that is a challenge for us, because when we go to initial attack fire, we have all our resources committed to doing different functions. We do have the capabilities to do the mapping behind that, the geospatial analyst component to that, but that's going to take a dedicated team just to focus on that. So that is somewhat challenging to do. I believe it'd be great information to do, but within the first 30 minutes to 2 hours, it's going to be very, very hard to support that type of mission. But I think it'd be great if we could get something out there to the media, but that takes
I'm actually thinking, with respect to fires I've seen around here in the past, not so much in the first couple hours, but after things sort of establish, just so people know where it's going and where it's not going.
Right. So through the public information officer who works for the incident commander, that is the pipeline which Megan works for in a large incident, that is developed and can be put up, and they do things different way through social media and putting that information up there. It can be shared. So after we get established, if you will, and we get our incident base set up with all the support functions behind that is easily achievable.
Great.
And PIO also usually does try to put out an incident status update page every few hours during a fire, and those will often include maps. But in terms of directly having that go through the media, it kind of goes through us, and then the media just picks it up from our distribution through our social media.
Yeah, I'm hoping you guys will emphasize that more instead of, because the media, like I said, I've been watching, I'm sure you guys have too, the fires in Northern California, Southern Oregon.
Mhm.
I show pictures of burning buildings and trees. They never show you where the fire is. You never see a map. I couldn't tell you where that area is. I couldn't tell you
Also,
which way that fire is burning.
even if we do give stuff to the media, we can't control what they what they
not.
promote. So I mean, they kind of tend to do their own thing, learning more and more. But
you noticed
Mhm.
that.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I've got one real quick. It's very disturbing to hear about drones flying and interfering with your protocol of taking care of a fire. You know, that put lives at risk, and it could create such a there's no way of controlling the fire then. I mean, to some extent, I really think there should be a law against that. It seems like the TV and company, the stations are really responsible for the drones probably. I can't imagine a resident wanting to do that, but just as a comment, you should come first and your equipment should come first.
Ed, there is a law against it,
Yes.
and it's mostly private individuals. Nine
Right.
out of
That
10
is correct.
private individuals.
Yep.
I have a drone license. I can tell you there's a law against it.
Yeah.
Yep. And we even have a local ordinance
Mhm.
that this commission passed actually within Calabasas that will
Which pretty much
that will-
follows the federal guidelines for flying of drones. So yeah, we visited it many times, and there is a law
Okay.
against it. I have one last thing, talking about evacuations. And Richard touched on it, but I'm always concerned that there are people that will stand there and say, I'm not going to evacuate, no matter what I'm told. Can you speak to the residents about what that means for you? Because you guys are the experts on the ground in terms of what's happening with the fire and which way it's going. And a lot of times there's stuff we can't see.
Right. Yes, I can. So you're right. We do have a significant amount of people that choose not to evacuate. And so what we find is they don't see the urgency, so they wait. And then when they get in a situation where it is overwhelming, we get 911 calls for help. And now we have to go from a firefighting mission to a life safety mission. And what that does is it gives us a different set of options for life safety when you could have someone that could evacuate in a timely manner for the biggest component that we look at, which is the life safety component. Now, when we have people that tend to stay, when they're challenged with something they've never seen before, they don't know what their options are, they're scared, and then we have to go into a life rescue mode. It puts a lot of people's lives in jeopardy. That one also being our firefighters that are in possibly a position that they're combating the fire. Now they have to potentially put themselves and who they're rescuing in a very vulnerable position to make some big decisions on how to protect the life of others that could have been avoided. So please look at our Ready, Set, Go. Have your family ready when there's an evacuation need, whether it be an order, a warning, or even a shelter in place type of scenario. But we're going to focus on the evacuation component. Is when you need to evacuate, you need to take direction and leave the operational area, because your life is the most important thing that we think about. And then we're going to go in there and fight fire. We don't want to put our firefighters in a dangerous situation. An advancing fire front will put up heat energy in excess of 1,200 to 1,500 degrees. And so our options become limited when a wall of fire is potentially coming towards people or a home that now we have to put ourselves in a different position rather than commenting the fire or doing some other tactics when we have somebody that is caught on a road system, they stayed at their house. There's so many different scenarios that changes the dynamics for what our brave firefighters do. Is please look at take those evacuation orders very seriously and plan ahead.
Sharon, can I add a question?
Yes.
Okay. I get a sense that there's a backlog or a lot of delayed demand for SERP training. Where do we stand in terms of getting more training sessions scheduled and filled?
Well, I am currently working with our CERT coordinator within the department to get you guys, first of all, the class that was missed last time. I think it was the last class of the course. Getting that getting a retake for that class, and then getting a new class scheduled. It's just like you said, there's a big demand since no one's been able to do any training for the past however long. But you are in the queue, so I will work with Debbie and let you know as soon as I get a date for that.
Just out of curiosity, how long is the queue and how far down are we?
I would say that we could probably get something started within the next like 2 or 3 months. It's just that there's also a shortage of instructors at the moment, so we need to do a train the trainer course to get more of our people certified to be certain instructors, but that is something that we are actively working on.
Okay.
Right, I've been asking her for months now, so she definitely knows.
Yeah, it is on the top of my list.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Sharon, I think you're muted. If you're still there.
I think she might have
We
dropped
appreciate
off.
the support.
Yeah, we might have lost Sharon. Maybe she
Where did Sharon go?
might have had some connectivity issues. But
Matt, you're in charge.
All right, I'm next in line, I suppose. Any other questions for our partners with fire?
No, just thank you for all the work that you do to keep us safe. Thank you.
Thank you for the support. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you both. I believe that brings us to our first presentation, which goes hand in hand with this conversation, which is our defensible space and home hardening. So I will turn it over there unless Debbie, there's any additional comment before that on the presentation. There's Sharon, she's back.
The marvels of technology. My computer decided to do an update in the middle of all this.
Well, we just finished fire and we're about to start the presentation. So that's as far as I got.
Thank you. All right, are we starting the presentation?
Should I go ahead?
Yes.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me. My name is Antione Kunsch, and I work for the Resource Conservation District of the Santa Monica Mountains on community resilience and wildfire preparedness. So I'm going to share my screen and to presentation. Okay, can everybody see the screen correctly?
Yes.
Great. Perfect. So for those of you who are not familiar with the RCD of the Santa Monica Mountains is a special district of the state of California, so a state agency. And we promote land stewardship and resource conservation. We have a team of biologists working on restoration services, biological inventory, and a team of educators and an education department working on environmental education and distance learning with all the schools in the area, in the larger Santa Monica Mountains area. And since July last year, it's been like a year now, we have a community resilience department that I'm leading, and where we have a few wildfire preparation, wildfire education programs that I'm going to describe in that presentation. So before starting, I wanted to share this map that maybe some of you have seen already. It's just a reminder of the fire regime that we have here in the Santa Monica Mountains area. What you're seeing in yellow and in red is a deviation from the natural fire regime of the area of the chaparral and of the coastal sedge scrub. What it means is that the area in yellow and red is burning at a rate that is higher than the natural rate. You only have the small areas in green that are burning at the natural rate. So it's just a reminder that when we talk about the chaparral and the coastal sedge scrub as a fire adapted vegetation, it is a fire adapted vegetation, but it's good to remind that it is adapted to a specific fire regime, and that right now that fire regime is disturbed, and very often we have fires too often that may threaten native vegetation and promote the growth of invasive grasses, flash fuels that are a real problem in the area for wildfire. So I'm going to talk first about a program that we started back in 2019 called the Guidance for Sustainable Defensible Space Landscaping in the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area and Southern California. The goal of that project was to find an answer on how we can increase wildfire resilience and maintain habitat quality. And two responses came up. One is that obviously we need to work on reducing human emission and the frequency of large fires. So this is mostly an education component to really educate people what to do and not to do in the high fire risk zone. And the other component that this project is focusing on is how to manage the wildland-urban interface, the WUI, to maintain or reestablish native vegetation, especially doing those flash fuel replacement program, trying to eliminate the invasive grasses where they are to restore the native vegetation. And this project led to the creation of a website called defensiblespace.org that I'm going to present now. So before I go ahead, that project was from a grant from Cal Fire Prevention Grant, awarded in late in 2018, I believe. We started working on it in 2019 with funding coming from the California Climate Investment Program. So this is the homepage of the website, defensiblespace.org. And you will see we'll dive a little bit more in each one of the 6 sections that we have. One is focusing on home hardening. That's what we call the house. Any effort to improve wildfire resilience should start with the home and move outward from the home, from the first zone, the first 5 feet, the first 50 feet, and the first 100 feet from the home. So first we start with home hardening, then we dive into the landscape and the defensible space. We have a section about native plants, the role of native plants in wildfire resilience, and the role of invasive plants and the grasses I mentioned. We have an interactive map on the location section that allows homeowners to see on an interactive tool where they are located, where is the wildland-urban interface, where is the closest fire station, which community wildfire preparation plan they are under, and different other layers that they can consult. We have a community section to really improve community preparedness and encourage community to work together. And we've been doing that successfully with several communities, including one in Calabasas that has been mentioned earlier, the West Ridge HOA, where we've been successful in working with this community. Finally, we have some resources available on the website as well. So that website was a group effort. We had a technical advisory committee with the Los Angeles County Fire Department, the Ventura County Fire Department, the National Park Service, the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area, California State Park, the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, the California Fire Science Consortium, the California Native Plant Society, the Mountains Restoration Trust, some other nonprofits, including Tree People and the Theodore Payne Foundations, local Fire Safe Council in Topanga, the University of California, and the USGS. So as I mentioned on the website, we have home hardening, where we emphasize the message about starting with the home, working with fire-resistant materials, and especially preventing amber intrusion, which is the cause of more than half the home ignition in LA County. We talk about the defensible space, focusing on the amber-resistant zone, which is the first 5 feet from the house, firewise landscaping, and maintenance and spacing guidelines through the different zones of the landscape. The community preparedness section, we talk about community planning, the wildfire action plan, and how to sign up for emergency alerts. The location section that I mentioned, to understand the risk of wildfire and really get a sense of the location for each homeowner. The plant section, where we demystify what fire resistant means when we're talking about plants, what are the benefits of native plants, and how to create a sustainable landscape that improve wildfire resilience. And finally, we have some additional resources and FAQ. So home hardening, and you can see the images that you have here, that is actually a demonstration structure that is open to the public. People can come and see how different materials can be used to improve home hardening. And this year we are working on the garden portion. So we got funding to do a garden with different theme that is going to be from 0 to 100 feet from the home, and hopefully this will be completed this year. And I'm happy to give you the address. It's located at a fire station near Topanga. So I'm happy to share the address as well. So this is what you see when you go on the home hardening section of the website. At the very top here, you can choose between new construction, upgrade or retrofit, and maintenance guidelines. And so you have different information depending on what you're focusing on. Then you have information for each architectural feature of the house. We talk about the roof, the eaves, the gutters, the vents, and you have different type of information for each architectural feature. This one is about the roof, so you see a lot of information about the type of material, class A roofing, and so on. This diagram that you see here is present on all the pages of the home hardening and is really a tool for homeowners to understand how to prioritize, because nobody has an unlimited budget to do home improvements. So this way they can understand the relative cost of each improvement, of each upgrade, with the relative priority level of each one. For example, having a Class A roof is a #1 priority. It's also one of the most expensive. The #1 priority and the cheapest one is always maintenance that you see here in the corner. And that's a message that we emphasize all along the website. And finally, on the panel on the right, you have specific information and background information. So now for the landscape section, when we jump into the defensible space, it's built in a very similar way. At the top, you also have new and upgrade, and you have seasonal maintenance, giving suggestions to homeowners about what type of tasks they should be doing in the fall, in the summer, in the winter, to really reduce the risk of ignition of the landscape. The content here is not divided by architectural feature, but divided by zones. So the first one is when we start with the home. You always start with the home, as I mentioned before, and then you have what we call zone 0, zone 1, and zone 2. Zone 0 is the newest addition to the notion of defensible space. I believe it was created in October last year through a new piece of legislation by the California legislature, creating the amber resistant zone. I believe CAL FIRE and the Board of Forestry still has to come up with the official guidelines to really inform what will go under the amber resistant zone and what will be the requirements. What we have here, that what you have in the amber resistant zone, ideally nothing should be combustible. So that means no mulch, ideally no plants. It's very often a hard sell with homeowners, but it's really to communicate the need that to reduce the risk for a fire to be transmitted to the structure. Those first 5 feet are really critical to the survival of the house, and that's what we're trying to transmit with that information. Here you have a diagram with built-in messages where people can see which zone around the house is being described. And we managed to put messages as well in the type of vegetation that is in the area. For example, you see there's barely no vegetation in the first 5 feet. As you move to like 50 or 30 feet from the house, depending on the slope, you start to have some shrubs, you have a tree, and as you move outwards more to 100 feet, then you have more and more vegetation. It's kind of like this gradient of vegetation as you move outwards from the house, the idea being to reduce the amount of energy stored in direct proximity of the house in case of an ignition. And finally, on the right hand, we have a panel with recommendation. The number of recommendation depends on the zone, but for example, here you have no vegetation recommended within the first 5 feet, keeping the surrounding free of combustible materials. Sometimes when I do evaluations, I see a pile of firewood right next to the house, so it's usually not a great idea. We talk about mulch, asking people to prioritize non-organic mulch in the first 5 feet, so prefer gravel, rock, pebbles, or bare ground, something that is not combustible, and reserve organic mulches for area beyond 5 feet. So the diagrams that I mentioned are a key part of this website. We saw, so here I'm like blowing them up a little bit more so you can see them more clearly. But this is really what we have on the website. So in orange here, you have the first 5 feet. In yellow, this is what we call zone 1 or the home protection zone, where the goal is really to reduce the amount of energy that is stored in that area, create some fire break with walkway, pathways that would break down the progression of the fire if there were to be an ignition through embers or through the fire front. And that distance can change depending on the slope. If you are like in the Santa Monica Mountains, obviously we have a lot of properties that are located on the slope. So you want to increase that distance from 30 feet to 50 feet if you are on a slope that is more than 20%. The zone 2 that we call the thinning or reduced fuel zone goes up to 100 feet or 200 feet, depending on the local regulation and the decision by the local fire departments. It's really a zone where you focus on ladder fuel. So you want to disconnect any connection between ground cover, shrubs, tree to avoid the fire climbing into the tree of canopies and releasing a lot more energy than it would have otherwise. It's really a maintenance zone where you want to keep the landscape clean and thin. And the last zone, which is not really a last zone, is about the surrounding wildland, where you focus on removing invasive grasses, and continue thinning depending on the recommendation from the fire department. So we have a few other diagrams available on the website. This is about the fuel ladders that I mentioned earlier. And this is really to pass on the message about what those are. So when you have a fire that is ignited at the ground level, you really want to create this connection between the canopies to avoid what you're seeing on the screen here. And you can avoid that by having some clearance between a shrub that you may have under the canopy of a tree and the lowest branches of that tree. And we have those distances and dimensions explained on the website. It's always about vertical and horizontal clearance. And finally, the community section, we also have a few diagrams. Not all properties extend to 100 feet from the house. So very often you're going to have some intersection, some overlap between the different defensible space of different properties. And so understanding who is responsible for what and what kind of vegetation maintenance homeowners should be doing in those different zones. All of that is explained on the website as well. And you can see at the very top, so this tab is about community risk. And we have another one about getting organized, where we talk about go-to bag, the type of material that people should have ready in case of an evacuation, and the wildfire action plan, where we also talk about the ready, set, go plan by Cal Fire and LA County. So that was about the website, defensiblespace.org. I also want to mention the different programs we have available through the grants that we are managing at the RCD. And we have a few here. So we have a home ignition zone evaluation, a chipping and composted mulch program, defensible space consultation, post-fire native vegetation restoration, and the wildfire survey. So first, the home ignition zone program. We launched that program in September of 2020, so almost a year ago. We have done about 150 evaluations throughout the region. An evaluation is a 45-minute review of the vulnerability of the house and the landscape to wildfire and especially ember ignition. So a trained volunteer, we have a few trained volunteers, but usually I'm the one doing most of the evaluations because COVID did not allow us to hold training session, unfortunately. So we review home hardening principle, defensible space principles, and make specific recommendations to the homeowners to reduce the risk specifically on their property. And at the end of the evaluation, that, as mentioned, takes about 45 minutes, homeowners receive a detailed 4-page report with the top 5 priorities identified at the end. Very often, the top 5 priorities are the same within a community because the houses are built similarly and have the same vulnerability. So it's very often about the vents, the protection of the vents, the open eaves, if some houses are built with open eaves, and the first 5 feet around the house. Those are usually the top 3 recommendations. People can register. So I forwarded the PDF to Debbie, I believe. We have a few links here where people can register on the website and get on the list to receive an evaluation. All of that is free and funded by a grant. Then we have the community chipping and mulch program. This is a pilot program that is at the intersection of a traditional community chipping program and a compost gardening program. What we do is that the RCD contracts with a landscape professional to offer free chipping services for homeowners who register. Homeowners are responsible for preparing the chipping piles, and we encourage them to mix the mulch that is resulting from the chipping on their site with compost from the Las Virgenes Municipal Water District. We build that program in partnership with them. The goal is for homeowners to reuse that mix of mulch and compost on their property in a safe way, so not in the first 5 feet, as I mentioned, but further away in the landscape, to enhance the habitat and improve carbon sequestration, as well as reducing the wildfire risk. So the wildfire risk is reduced by the chipping of the brush of the hazardous vegetation, and we enhance the habitat with this mulch compost mix, providing carbon sequestration, water saving benefits, and we have a whole list of all the benefits of using that type of compost on our website. For homeowners who are not able to pick up the compost by themselves at the Las Virgenes Municipal Water District, assistance is available as well. So people should not feel that they cannot register because they're not able to pick up compost. We try to be accommodating and helping as much as possible. And the compost will be free as well for participants in the program, which is not always the case. We have funding available for post-fire native vegetation restorations. So for homeowners who have been impacted by recent wildfires, it could be Woolsey, it could be some more recent wildfires. We have money available to help them restore their habitat. So it's a really case-by-case program because all sites are very different and very specific. So the type of measure that we will be able to provide will depend on the location, on the slope of the size of the property. But any homeowners who is interested should contact us so that we can do a site visit and provide some habitat design plan and funding assistance for restoration efforts. And finally, we have an ongoing wildfire survey that we created in collaboration with the Conservation Biology Institute, which is an environmental nonprofit, with inputs from the National Park Service as well. The goal of that survey is really to understand what motivates homeowners to take action for home hardening and fire-wise landscaping, as well as understanding the barriers that they are encountering, and really understanding what is going wrong from when they receive the message, when they receive the education about wildfire preparedness, and the implementation of those measures. Where is it broken? That's what we're trying to understand with that survey. So if there's a way for you to help us spread the word about the survey and get homeowners to respond, it's totally anonymous, takes about 15 minutes, and it will help us tremendously to understand how we can improve future programs. Homeowners, residents of the area are encouraged to sign up for newsletters so that they can stay tuned with all the programs that we have. It's a long list, but definitely keep in touch. More information available at defensiblespace.org, and a reminder that donations are also very helpful for the RCD because we are a state agency, but we function very much like a nonprofit, with about 65% of a budget coming from grants, contracts, and donation. And from now, I can take any question that you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions?
It's not a question.
Yeah, I do
Not
have
a
one.
question, Antoine, as much as it is a. That's fantastic. I really like the science that you're putting in behind the outreach as well. It makes a lot of sense, and I'm also impressed by the survey, trying to get to the psychological blockage that creates the apathy. So good job. Thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Could you please repeat the website address, the URL?
The website is defensiblespace.org.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And all the programs I mentioned later in the presentation, you can find those on rcdsmm.org, the website of the RCD.
Yep. Are there any other questions? It was a great presentation and major thing, and I took the survey.
Great, thank you. I'm glad.
Any other questions? Debbie, thank you for bringing him to us. Greatly appreciated. If there are no other questions, thank you very much, Antoine.
Thank you for having me.
Next up is the discussion on the flock camera system. Tom.
Thank you, Chair, members of the commission. For those of you, and I don't know if anyone on the call has met me, probably John and Debbie. I am a consultant with Interwest Consulting, who is providing traffic engineering services to the city while there's some staffing shortages. So I've been working here for, gosh, almost a year now. Interestingly enough, when I first started my career back in the 80s, back in the early 90s, I was part of the staff that served the city as a consultant when they were first incorporated. Okay, so I've got a short presentation here. Let me grab. All right. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Great. So I'm going to talk kind of more general about the automated license plate recognition program. And I'll talk a little bit about the flock cameras specifically later. There's actually two systems that I'll talk about. The city has not yet decided what system it's going to go with, but that'll be a decision that we'll be making in the near future. So this program was brought to us by the Sheriff's Department and the Greater Moldwood HOA. They both separately approached the city about putting in an ALPR program, generally for the same reasons about law enforcement, monitoring of stolen vehicles, and then as was discussed earlier, this was something that could hopefully be used to address speed contest and speeding in neighborhoods. The system allows for monitoring of license plate information, and it's been used by law enforcement in many agencies across the Southern California area. When they're looking for people of interest, they'll get notified. It helps them for gathering additional information after a crime has been committed. If the cameras are known in the community that they're out, it deters some criminal behavior. And one of the things that's really neat about this system is it shares data between all the different law enforcement agencies. So when you have a person or a vehicle of interest, say a stolen vehicle, that license plate can be put into the system, and any agency that has the flock system or the other system in it will automatically come up if it enters one of those cities or the county area where they have these. So it's really good for that also, because if your vehicle gets stolen, that person's likely not going to stay in Calabasas, but there's lots of agencies in the area that as they enter those, the Sheriff's Department would get notified. I also want to talk about what it is not. It does not take photographs of drivers or passengers. It's not a red light or speed enforcement camera. It's not used for traffic signal operations like the photo in the lower right corner. Those are video detection cameras, which the city does have at some of its locations. That's only used to detect the presence of a vehicle. It doesn't store video, and the data is not compiled and used or sold to companies for advertising. So it's not becoming part of this big data set. And state law, there are restrictions on how it is to be used. The agency, both the city and the Sheriff's Department, are required to have a policy in place. A copy of that draft policy that the city is working on was included in the packet, and it's only for law enforcement agencies. So for instance, even if the Greater Moldwood HOA decides that they want to also do this program and they want to pay for and put those cameras on their private property, the only people that have access to that data is the Sheriff's Department. Typically, these cameras are mounted on city traffic signal or Southern California Edison streetlight poles. They can be powered by solar or conventional power, and they capture the vehicle license plate information, essentially using a neural processor in the camera system that sees the license plate and picks that out, and it stores it as a single photo and any other associated data. Some of the systems can actually tell in general, because of the shape of the vehicle, they can tell what type of vehicle it might be, and also potentially the color of the vehicle. And then law enforcement can go into that database and pick that individual photo with the associated data, pull it out and save it to use it for investigative purposes. And then after 30 days, anything that is just left in the system gets overwritten in the data that's on the camera itself. And then any saved data, the city is required by state law to hold it for at least a period of 2 years. Like I said earlier, the Sheriff's Department can have a license plate list. It's kind of a watch list that says, hey, these crimes have been committed recently. Somebody just called in about this person who has taken a child, and this is what the vehicle looks like. That can go into a watch list that then goes out and gets broadcast into the system. The Sheriff's Department has recommended initially 5 locations that they feel are kind of critical for the needs that they're looking at. The 5 locations are shown on this map: Las Virgenes at Agoura Road, Calabasas Road at Parkway Calabasas, Park Ora at Park Sorrento, Calabasas Road at Old Town, right at the city limit, and Mulholland Highway at Old Topanga. The intent would be to put out these 5 initially, kind of evaluate the program, and additional ones could be put out at other locations. There are 2 systems currently available that I'm aware of. Vigilant Solutions is one that's been around for a while. There's a lot of agencies out in Riverside County and some in LA County that have them. That picture on the top is one out in the city of Chino, and they have individual cameras mounted on the signal mast arms. They need a power source from the traffic signal, and they need, in many cases, a separate communication system. And the initial cost is high in the city of Eastville, where I also do some work. Their initial installation was almost $1 million for their 6 camera system. The Flock system, which is Jesse Munn from Flock, is here to help out, answer any questions. They're smaller cameras. The picture on the bottom is one I took in the city of Port Hueneme, where they have them. And they could be mounted to any city or SCE-owned pole. They're actually small enough and light enough that the city can put up a 3x3 post that would typically have like a sign on it, and they can mount the camera to that. So we're not restricted to traffic signal locations. We can kind of put them anywhere where we see a problem is occurring, and potentially even move them around if we want to periodically. They use solar power and are cellular communication networks. And the one camera can collect data across multiple lanes of traffic, so you don't need to have multiple cameras at one location. The initial cost is low. They have a subscription process. It's a little bit higher ongoing, but the initial cost is very low. The next steps in this program is tomorrow night, we're going to the Traffic and Transportation Commission. And then we're going to take some recommendations to City Council for their consideration, and probably come back a second time with an actual contract if they decide to move forward. Unfortunately, representatives from the Sheriff's Department that are working on this with me were not able to attend tonight. There was confusion because we've got back-to-back meetings, and the notices didn't go out for me correctly. So the Sheriff's Department is not here to help answer those kind of questions. I don't know if one of the officers is still here and can maybe ask about the location issues. So what we're asking for tonight is to give us some comments, whether it's on the program, your thoughts, your concerns, maybe on the locations, whether there's other locations that you want the Sheriff's Department and us to look at to see if maybe there's some higher priorities for those. And then if you want, make a recommendation to the City Council. And with that, Jesse and I would be happy to answer any questions.
I'd like to kick it off, if you don't mind. And I have a number of questions, but I'll save some of them for later because they may be asked by other people, and I don't want to take too much time. So first question is, how deep is the data? So if you do get information from a vehicle that's a problem vehicle, I mean, I don't know how to explain how deep is, but deep would be, are you going nationwide? You're going citywide? You're going local wise? You know,
yeah, so
it's a big part of the success of this program. If they're
yes.
coming from out of city or from smaller cities outside, our location, 30, 40 miles away. We want to feel safe that we're getting the right information to the sheriff's department.
Yeah. I'll probably let Jesse answer this question because it's really the database is going to be the flock safety system. And I'll let Jesse talk about kind of what the range of that system is.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. Thank you for the presentation. Commissioners, thank you for allowing me to be here today. So briefly on the data. So Flock gets its, what we're calling, and I believe you're describing, is its hot list notification data. And that's data on vehicles that may have a warrant or a felony. Every 2 hours, Flock pulls a list from the California Department of Justice, and it processes that data on the cameras. So if a vehicle that has been listed as a wanted or felony vehicle or stolen vehicle anywhere throughout the state hits one of the cameras in your network, law enforcement gets notified in near real time.
Thank you. That's important to know. That's that's perfect. May I ask one more question?
You sure can.
Okay. And by the way, the presentation was fantastic. It really covered a lot. We could discuss the locations, but one location in particular really hit me, and that's the one at Park Sorrento and Park Aura. I'm not, by then, a vehicle that's a problem child is already in the city. There are better locations. I'd like to discuss that. Certainly, Mulholland, and Mulholland is a great location. That wasn't listed. Who's making the decisions on the locations?
So the original 5 locations that I showed were the recommendations from the sheriff's department. The Park Sorrento at Park Aura is, my understanding is, it is based upon complaints from the area regarding speed contests along Park Sorrento and Park Aura. So this was a way to try and capture license plate data by time of day so that they can investigate and follow up.
Okay, because that road, Park Sorrento, has got roundabouts.
Well, no, let me just answer one of the part of that is that we've had a lot of complaints during this pandemic of people walking on the streets and the cars going way, way too fast down those roads. So time and time again, CPHA has gone to the city to talk about that because their area for the Honos Association is circling in that area. And it's been and I've been out there working, it's been a very dangerous area for quite some time. So
that makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
That explains why. I thought it was to prevent a vehicle that's a problem child from getting into the loop.
Yeah.
But for that purpose, I could see why. So I'll reserve my other questions for later so I don't occupy all the questions.
Thank you, Ed. Any other questions? Richard?
Thanks for the good presentation. 3 quick ones. Do you have a sample picture we could see of what your cameras pick up? How are your pictures transmitted? And are you able to measure speed?
So as far as a speed test, no, we do not monitor speed. That would be more on the traffic enforcement side of things. Flock is uniquely positioned in our technology, and machine learning is positioned to capture the rear of the vehicle. We do not have our cameras hanging on the vertical mast looking down into vehicles. We're hanging on the horizontal, or excuse me, not on the horizontal mast, on the vertical mast as the vehicles as they drive away. So it's hyper focused on the license plate and supporting vehicle fingerprint characteristics of the vehicle itself. So if the camera sees a white Ford truck with a bumper sticker, and that's oftentimes the description that's given to law enforcement is make, model, type, distinguishing characteristics, that's what they can look up with the Flock system that's very different, which is we saw a white Ford truck in this area at this time, and it had a roof rack or a bumper sticker. They can then search for a very small subset of vehicles and get the license plate, which is what they need as a potential lead to help follow up on a potential incident.
Does it also detect vehicle color?
It does. And I think a key note here, and I believe Mr. Albrecht talked about this too, Flock does not grab any personally identifiable information. We do not touch any other database to get any other information. We do not touch we do not get the VIN number. We do not get any data about the owner, the operators of the vehicle. It is strictly what we see. And based on that list from the DOJ, if there is a wanted notification out on that vehicle. If so, we don't know what it is. That's up to law enforcement to figure out. So there is no personally identifiable information in the flock ecosystem at any time.
So to go back a second, is the data that comes off your systems, the raw data, is it a photograph or is it processed information?
So it's a photograph that goes through a machine learning algorithm. So the photograph pops up, our machine learning looks at it, says, hey, that's a red Ford truck with a California license plate. Here's the license plate. Is that vehicle a known entity? If so, it notifies the law enforcement. If not, it stays viewable for 30 days before it's deleted.
Is there a place we can see any of your kind of pictures? Is there any websites that?
Let's see if I'll just pull one up for you. Give you an idea of what the back end stuff looks like. Let me open it up, run a search, and I will share my screen.
And again, by what means is it transmitted? Wirelessly or hardwire or what?
It's all LTE, so we are going to select whichever LTE vendor we need and works best in your area. The data is FIPS 240 compliant, means encrypted not only in transit and at rest, and has no public IP address.
John, I see your hand up, so I'll get to you in a minute.
Yeah, Richard, in the attachments in the staff report, there's a couple of pictures that show what the pictures come up towards the back. There's a number of different photographs. And I think that's probably what we're going to see here when he pulls that up, when Jesse pulls that up.
Yeah, that's in the second attachment. That's their proposal to the sheriff's department.
So this would be a standard image that would be received by law enforcement that would be searchable. So it would show the location of the vehicle, the time and date stamp, and then the vehicle make, model, and type.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Richard, any more questions?
No, thank you.
Brian.
I got one. Or Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question about, you said that it tries to match it or compares it to a known entity file, which is a law enforcement database, I presume. How often is that database purged?
So that database is updated every 2 hours.
I mean, purged from the standpoint of, if I buy a used car and for some reason it was previously owned by a serial killer, if I drive past one of these vehicles, am I going to get inundated by all of the sheriff's cars?
No, because in theory, if you bought a new car, you'd get a new plate.
No, if I bought a used car.
Well, there's two things. So the policy that's in place with all LPR is we can provide the initial insight, but it needs to be human verified. So the law enforcement's going to run that separately through separate law enforcement systems to confirm or deny information about the vehicle and the driver. So that's kind of the answer there. Is we're focused on the license plate, and if that license plate has data on it, it will show up. But if law enforcement were to pull that vehicle over, they could then clear that from the database for ongoing cases.
Yeah, and when the vehicle gets sold, even if it's person to person, one of the first things that should be done is you file with the DMV that it's a new owner, and that updates the database.
Okay.
Thank you. Matt.
All right. I'll go ahead.
Two quick things. Is there, within the algorithms that this is running, is it looking at anomalies? Let's say there's a plate that should be on a red pickup, but you're detecting it on a white sedan. Is it flagging those kind of issues for law enforcement?
So one of the notification reasons is stolen license plate. So anytime somebody reports a stolen license plate, that becomes part of the potential notifications that can go out. However, the flock system does not know if the right license plate is on that vehicle, right? So that would be up for law enforcement to hand verify. We would just notify them that, hey, that license plate was reported stolen, and law enforcement can then choose or not choose to take action.
Okay, fair enough. And I think the other side of it, much bigger conversation, would be if we get through this pilot, let's say, of the 5 cameras that are positioned out, it may be worth exploring, because we've got so many HOAs and so much private road in Calabasas, if we'd want to look at opening up this as a service where an HOA could fund it for their, let's say, their entry system or something similar to that. It still is obviously feeding back to law enforcement. They don't have access to it, but it may be a way to increase the coverage of the community without the city having to front that money. So just a consideration.
Yeah. So my understanding is that if the city does okay it, it can be used now by a private entity, whether it's a parking lot or a private community. Greater Molewood asked there was an earlier question of the attorney's office whether they even need to ask because it's private property, and they asked, and the sheriff's department was hesitant to use it without city approval of the program and it being used within the city. But it's a good question. Whether legally they have to or not is another thing, but I think we're all on the same page about let's make sure that we're doing the right thing first and then allow it in those areas if it makes sense.
Two things there. Flock was founded as the vendor for HOAs and private businesses. So over half of the cameras that are in place right now are operated and run by HOAs and private businesses trying to reduce theft, trying to reduce crime, trying to put a 24-hour sentry at their shopping center. It is up to the city and to the HOA whether they choose to allow those notifications to go to law enforcement. And it's up to the HOA or the private business to choose whether they will permit it. So there is an agreement that takes place between Flock, the law enforcement side / city, and the HOA to determine if that happens. But there are plenty of Flock customers who do not have a tie-in with law enforcement. They just have this as a security tool for their private business or HOA. If an event occurs, they could then share footage with law enforcement as needed.
Right. Richard.
Sir?
Technology's been around for what, about 20 years or so?
Approximately, yes.
So historically, Jesse, and you know what happens. I mean, what have the typical abuses of it been?
So California's addressed several of them quite well. One is the audit trail. So there is a required audit trail for any and every search done in the Flock system. So anytime somebody makes a search to search for a vehicle, that is logged and tracked indefinitely, right? So that's one big thing as far as oversight and visibility that's been put in place. Number two, and one that was done by Flock, we do not retain data indefinitely. Flock retains data for 30 days. We do not have any rights of ownership to that data. So upon the 31st day, that data is hard deleted. We firmly believe and have the research to back it up that the vast majority of any type of use case for LPR technology is within that first 30 days. With the understanding there are some outliers. We understand that, but to kind of compensate for what's the happy medium between privacy and law enforcement, that's the date that we found to be effective nationwide.
As a follow-up, I was thinking about that picture you put up. Are the images typically still pictures, flashes, or
They're all still pictures.
They're what?
They're all still images.
That's what,
yeah.
Okay, so the system, it's snapping everything it sees, right? It goes
Motion
through.
activated, correct.
And then it's purged after, you said 2 hours?
30 days is when the footage is gone.
Oh, 30 days, or when the images cycle through.
So we pull the list from the California DOJ. They update it every 2 hours.
Got it.
So we pull it down, and if someone in that 2 hour time frame recovers a stolen vehicle, it goes into the state system as recovered. It's no longer on the updated the hot list that vehicle is stolen.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Are there any other questions? Brian, did we answer all your questions?
I've got two things. One, I want to congratulate my fellow commissioners. They're all great questions, really good questions. And it's getting to the bottom of how effective this program would be. One of the things when I looked at Flock originally, going way back, in fact, I wanted to mention Kim Benton was the one who I first worked with. I don't know if she's still there or not.
Yeah. So there's two sides to the company, the private side and the public side. So she's my counterpart on working with our private customers.
Great. Well, she was very, very helpful. And she mentioned something that really rang so clear with me. And that is that so many other cities around the country and within our state, specifically Temecula and some other ones, Pasadena, that are very close to us, were very, very successful. So I made some inquiries about that, and those cities that I called were very happy with it. And I think we will be too. I want to make mention of one thing. The idea for Greater Molewood, before we tried to take this as we are now citywide, was really to capture the entrances and exits to the main entrances in the city. And as Kim described it to me, we really need 2 cameras at each intersection because we're figuring out the cost. And we were going to pass that cost on to the residents of Greater Molewood, which was really, when you broke it all down, a lot less than the security car traveling around 24/7. And she said, you need 2 cameras, one for cars going in and cars going out. So we capture a car going in. Now we know it's in the net, it's in the city, and they do their business, unfortunately, and then they exit. So the sheriff's department says, this is a bad guy. We're going to come in. We're going to look for them. We know where they came in, through which section of the city, through the camera, but they may exit another part of the city to get out. So they may be looking for a car that they think is still here, but in fact, it's actually gone. So I would like you to clear that up. If a car is in the net, will it be captured on the way out with the same camera?
So you're talking about one of the strategies that's involved, and that's called a virtual gate. And that means, we've got some cities, the Jersey Village in Texas, it's 7 square miles to have 58 cameras. And what that means is every entrance in, every entrance out, is captured by a Flock camera. So they can truly gate the city, because the entry cameras, those are the proactive side. That's the notification of a known or suspect vehicle entering the city. Now, the interior cameras, the cameras that are in the jurisdiction, that's helping law enforcement know, okay, well, they came into the city, we're on the other side of the city. Now we just got another hit on that car, a 1.5 miles into the city, turning left on Calabasas Drive. So the interior cameras play a part. And then the other part of that really is the evidentiary side. In case of a crime that is already occurred, it's extremely important to know what time that vehicle and where that vehicle left, right? So knowing that vehicle came in at 11:52 p.m. on southbound Calabasas and then left at 12:42 at, on X Street, now you have an actual picture of, okay, well, they were in the city for X amount of time. And with other resources that law enforcement has, potentially a larger ecosystem of Flock cameras, being able to share with other cities in the nearby vicinity, they can do a lot of research on criminal behavior, patterns of behavior, how law enforcement, crooks are committing that kind of organized retail theft here, and then they're going to Glendale, who's a Flock customer, and then they're going to Azusa, who's a Flock customer, and it helps them put those things together. So that's really the main purpose of those exit cameras. And it really just depends on how wide the roads are, how much distance is there, but usually you would need 2 cameras, one to capture inbound, one to capture outbound.
Thank you. I think that's very important.
Any
We don't
other
want the sheriff's department to go wandering around looking for a vehicle, and then over time, a short period of time, they're going to be disappointed just by driving around. We need to help them by pinpointing if their mission is to get the car and they jump back on the freeway, they know they're gone. They're going to have to give this one up. They just didn't have enough time to get them. So,
Or they just call it down to the La Cañada station and say, hey, guys, they're heading your way.
Yep. Brian,
You've been using the term suspect vehicle. And I guess my question is, suspicion of what? I mean, at what time does a vehicle fall into the state suspicious vehicle category?
So when it's reported, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And well, I mean, on Nextdoor today, I don't know if anybody saw it or not. Somebody was complaining about a black SUV that collided with his car and knocked the rear view window, the mirror off. And he had taken a picture of it, got partial license. Is that going to be in that system? I mean, how? I mean, I can see that the guy who's doing, armed robberies and home invasions, helping take them off the street, I would applaud that. I just worry about, mission creep. Are we going to be flagging cars that were involved in minor hit and run, or assumed, or yeah, you know where I'm going with this. That's, what is the definition of a suspect vehicle?
That's a great question. And I wish we had an LA County Sheriff on here to talk about that. There's a process they have to go through to get something onto that list. And the starting point is a police report's filed, somebody's filing that their vehicle was stolen, and then giving that information, that data gets put into the state system. Same thing when a felony gets occurred or the felony warrant occurs, and that vehicle's registered to the owner of that vehicle, then that information goes into that list. It's not a willy-nilly, hey, we decided this is a suspect vehicle and we're going to put it on the state list. There's a pretty thorough vetting process that has to happen to get inputted into that centralized state list to get available to the cameras.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. A couple of things, but if the cameras go up, are there going to be signs posted in the city that there is a video, or not a video, but your car could potentially have a picture taken of it?
So there is the option on the private side. Many of the HOAs and private communities choose to post a sign. We will put one up. On the public cameras, it's rarely done.
So I can answer that. So for red light enforcement, it's required in the state to do that. For this type of system, it's not required, but it is something that I think the city might want to think about. If it's something that you want to recommend that the city council consider, that certainly can be part of a motion. There are cities that have these types of system, the other manufacturer that have put up, welcome to the city of Riverside, smile, you're being watched, or something, So some cities have done that. To the extent that Calabasas wants to do that, it's up for discussion.
Deputy DiMatteo, I see you're still on. Is there something that you can offer on that subject?
Yeah, you know what? I can't really speak on the specifics of the system, but I can tell you that I have used it, and it's a great tool. I've arrested numerous people off of ALPR hits, and the technology works great.
I also will share with you that back when we were looking at cameras for the Calabasas Lake, we did look at Flock. It was a little bit too robust of a system for what we wanted it for. But the gentleman that introduced it to me was a former Los Angeles police officer, and he had nothing but high praise for it.
I do have a question for Mr. Mund, if that's okay. Sir, real quick. So when you buy a new vehicle in California, you get a temporary California license plate. Does Flock pick up those plates?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And some of you may think that, okay, hey, people put on temporary license plates on their car from like a dealer, like the old schools type. So we've gotten, California's gotten away from using those, and they go to the temporary plates. So it's good to know those are tracked. And there is a thing where if a vehicle comes into a neighborhood with a paper plate, I don't believe those are picked up by Flock. But however, I have to tell you, if law enforcement sees those plates, it's an immediate red flag and those vehicles are stopped. So that's one, probably one thing, one negative to the system is if people just don't have license plates on their car when they're committing a crime. That's the only thing. But for the majority of the system, it works great. I've made numerous arrests, and it's helped us solve some cases at Lost Hills.
Are there any other questions so that we can begin to move on here? Richard?
A lot of parts of Calabasas are very prone to power outages. Is there any battery backups on these things, or power? Will they keep running for a while?
Yeah, the solar power pack has a battery in it that runs the camera. I don't know the exact voltage of the camera, but it's pretty low.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Ed again. I don't have a question, just a statement that and when I looked at this, one of the comments that I heard really rang clear with me, and that is once these groups that come to different cities and they travel from city to city for thefts or whatever they've got in mind, they talk to each other. And when the word gets out that a city has a camera system, they wind up staying away from it. And I'm glad Officer Di Matteo is here. Maybe he can speak about that. But it gives another level of safety, or at least a feel of future significance to a lower crime rate.
Yeah, it's a great system. It also acts as a deterrent. So that's one major plus for the system. So a lot of people, when they see cameras, they don't really understand the specifics behind that camera. But again, it's a great tool. I like the technology. I think it works very well, and I think it'll help the city and it'll help our station. So yeah, you're right. Other criminals talk, and so if the word gets out that Calabasas has a camera system and it will be tracking and assisting law enforcement in catching these people, it could create a significant impact.
Thank you. Debbie, you have a question.
Question, but a statement. Tomorrow night at the Traffic and Transportation Commission meeting, a sergeant and a deputy are supposed to be at that meeting. So if you have any questions, maybe Sharon, you can talk to one of the other commissioners there and make sure that they ask those questions for that meeting.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I want to thank both of you for a wonderful, insightful presentation. We appreciate it as a commission, and good luck tomorrow night.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Okay, we're going to move on. I think we have completed the agenda. We have a couple of things on
Excuse me, Chair.
item number 6.
Sorry, does the commission want to make a motion of recommendation to city council at all? Or you want to just leave it with the Q&A that we had?
Any thoughts on that from the group?
I would love to see a motion.
I'd see a motion.
Okay, would one of you make a motion?
I'd like to make that motion that we accept the flock system throughout the 5 designated areas within Calabasas.
And do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second the motion.
Are there any questions regarding the motion at this point in time? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. It's unanimous. Good luck, gentlemen, tomorrow night.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other items on, in item number 6 that we want to talk about, Debbie?
Yeah, there are.
Thought there might be.
This new report, I titled it just Emergency Preparedness Report. It used to be the SERP report.
Right.
And it also used to be the false alarm report. And so what I decided to do is put the false alarm information in this emergency preparedness report. So it's all together in one. The first item on there was the discussions with the city manager, which we had already discussed. So we're done with that one. Crime prevention, I know you wanted to talk about it and form a subcommittee or a task force. We could ask 2 commissioners if they want to volunteer to be on the task force, and then we can work through that later.
I would love to be on the task force. But I also, having said that, want to make sure that this group of people is included in the discussions. And if it's one-on-one, but their input to this crime prevention is also very important.
I'm happy to join that one too.
Okay, Matt. Thank you, Matt.
Sure.
Okay, all right, so we can get going on that. The next item on here was emergency preparedness activities. The city manager, and just from listening to all of you about what we need to do for emergency preparedness, is to get the word out. So saying that, we decided to attend all the meetings, not the meetings, but all the events, major city events that happen in the city, like the 4th of July, which we just missed. And the, what else do we have here?
Got the Pumpkin Festival, we got the Art Festival, all the major city events where we can do a public education outreach. We're going to try to do that.
So if you guys could, Debbie or John, send us a list of what they are, and we'll have people sign up, because I'd love to do one of them. I'm just not sure which one I can do, but I will certainly sign up to do one, because I think that we all do need to get the message out there.
Okay, yeah, I'll get the dates of all the events and send it out. I just purchased a really cool tent, a pop-up tent that is going to be specific for emergency preparedness and CERT, disaster preparedness, and EPIC if they want to join me. But yeah, I was planning on having my own little booth. And so, and just making it really special and getting people to come and talk with us. So.
Yes.
Debbie, I have a question. Do you have enough room in your little booth to have EPIC be there if it was just one of us? Or would you like EPIC to have their own?
No, it's a 10 by 10 tent. So however many people we can fit in there is fine with me. And I think it would be a good idea.
Great. We'll be there.
Yeah, the other thing, Debbie, on the crime prevention task force or subcommittee, that's to look into also a crime expo. That's a possibility, or something that we want to repeat again. And also perhaps in the future, we could talk about a fire expo to do something like that at Founders Hall. But yeah, we have a big tent, so we can include everyone.
I will say to that, John, that I wrote down a note to exactly as I was listening to Antoine talk about how something like that, we were looking for something new to show people, to give them perspective of what it means to be fire safe. And that was a nice new little tool that we bumped into tonight. So somehow I'd like to incorporate that.
Had some great ideas. I mean, I just love their philosophy. Yeah. And I'm definitely going to incorporate that into things that I send out, you know, on social media. Yeah, no, I like them a lot. They've
Right. We're going to have Anton come eventually and give that same presentation to the city council as a whole. One other thing I wanted to mention is Deputy Matteo comes to one council meeting a month also and gives a presentation. We're probably going to work with Megan and Battalion Chief Smith to do something similar on a fire basis, at least once a month, go to the council to give them an update on a lot of the things that this commission is working on and a lot of things that Debbie does such fine work on also.
Thank you, John.
Hey, Debbie. Just one follow up on the setup of the tent and which is great. I think I mentioned this on our call with the city manager, and I think it might be something to consider as we move forward with the potentially like the next group of vaccinations that might come for lower age groups, or if there's ever follow-up vaccinations, those would be a great place to focus having a booth too. If it's partnering with one of the local pharmacies to have it in the parking lot or something like that, just thinking of another group of people that we may not catch at city events, you may be able to catch in those environments too.
And the Chamber of Commerce, they would be a good group. Partnering, like Sharon has always said, we need to partner with people. So.
Yep.
Norma sat with me at the summer concert just recently, and we were right there, right in front of where everybody walks by, and nobody really came to our booth or tent except for a couple of kids that just were there, and they wanted all the swag. They took the little bracelets and the face masks and the candy. So those were our biggest customers. So we've decided that since that venue wasn't really the right venue to have a booth, emergency preparedness booth there, because most people, when they're going to the concert, they're going to see the concert, and that's it. So we're not going to do those two anymore. So let's see, ham radio licensing. Norm Goodkin said they're not planning on doing any more classes for the rest of the year because interest had decreased. So they're gonna let it go for now. They're holding them every quarter, which is a lot, and they always had about 40 people. And I think COVID is over, and people are just they're going to take a break for a while.
Yeah.
So that'll resume next year. And then we're still doing the SERP radio net every Wednesday morning at 8. And then the CERT training, Kindon had already talked about. I'm working with Megan, plug her every week to see if we can do that makeup drill for the CERT training, and then also a new class. So we're still working on that. And on the back of that page, second page here, false alarm program. The false alarm, the second quarter statistics were similar to the first quarter statistics. Both had about 120 false alarms within that 3-month period. And the last thing on here was CPR training, which we just did. And we had 17 people from city volunteers and city employees. So, and I'll probably hold another one in about another 6 to 8 months, because it's due every 2 years through the American Heart Association.
Thank you.
So that's all I have. Any more questions on that?
Matt?
Yeah, just one. On the false alarms ballpark, what's our annual income on that? Do you know off the top of your head, roughly?
No, but I know not last year, the year before, we did quite well. And that was only because, certain businesses have just repeat, and they don't seem to mind to pay, tens of thousands of dollars. So,
well, I ask because it may be an interesting revenue source if this flock system moves forward. It seems very much kind of one tied in with the other, as we're grossing money, for the city based on these, and we're also reducing some law enforcement response in theory if we're doing it right. It may be a way to direct some money into additional systems or otherwise.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Debbie, we've finished the agenda. I do want to make sure we keep future agenda items on there, being the appreciation luncheon and the team court involvement when that comes back up. Are there any other future agenda items that anybody would like to put on there? I see nothing. Okay. Any other thoughts before I close out? It was a busy night, and I appreciate all your time. And the questions were great for our presenters tonight. It was a very healthy, I haven't felt like we've had this healthy of a meeting in a long time. So thank you all very much for sticking with it. There's a lot of wonderful things starting to happen for all of us within the city and reaching out and being part of the problem solving. So having said that, may I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make it.
I have a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Our next meeting is October 25th at 4 p.m.
And we do not know whether it's going to be in person or Zoom at this point in time. Okay, with that, I'm going to close out the meeting. The gavel is going down. See you all in October.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good meeting.
Great meeting.